Our guest is Dr. ACharvat5, and the topic is capital punishment in Tennessee after the conviction. And of course, Dr. ACharvat5, I think you've given us some excellent information dealing with the theories of capital punishment in Tennessee after the conviction. Let's give you an opportunity to continue that line of thought, or to perhaps introduce more, some additional topics in it that our audience might be interested in.
I guess a big question that I have, that I believe at this point is not known, and to my knowledge not been studied, is the impact of capital punishment on children and families. Not just the children and the families of the inmates, or the children and the families of the victims of the crime. I think a lot of children are impacted in a manner at this point that we're simply not taking a look at. I have had for many, many years a 10-year-old child in my house. They keep changing. It's not the same 10-year-old child, but one of the things that I have watched is the understanding of what is execution and how kids are processing this information and what it means to them. I think my kids had exposure simply through my work that they might not have had otherwise, but I have great concern, and primarily going back to the execution of Coe and how this was impacted, or how this was experienced by my children and by the other children that I saw. One incident happened at my daughter's elementary school that I just can't take from my mind. Apparently, a man was reading the steps of lethal injection out of the newspaper to his wife, and their little boy went to school and explained to all the kids on the playground the various steps toward lethal injection. I think we're desensitizing kids. I think the media coverage is very problematic because we don't want to overexpose children, but we also don't want to commit executions without adequate coverage. And I'm concerned, might not be a happening, but I'm concerned that that might be
a real issue.
I think another real serious concern that I have, I call generational recidivism. Recidivism, when you're dealing with parole and probation, that's an important factor. But when we're dealing with the issue that 70% of the children of incarcerated parents are estimated that they will follow their parent to prison.
70%, 7 out of 10. Is that what we're saying?
That's what has been estimated at this point. In fact, George Bush allocated a large amount of money for those children. But I have problems with how exactly it's being spent. There are many, many people effectively parenting from within the prison. Then I think that is a much stronger deterrent than role models outside of the family. And many, many people, there are classes, parents in prison, that are being offered and that have been for a long time. But again, I mean, this generational recidivism is another issue, and I think these are unintended costs of the death penalty. And as a third issue, I think it's really important just to simply look at the expense. The death penalty allowed us to look at cases with a magnifying glass, but so many cases within the prison are being unexplored in this manner. And I think that's one of the largest concerns, is the more money that the death penalty takes from our system, the less money is given to people who might be rehabilitatable and to families that might be reunited. I think the most important thing that could happen to a family of an incarcerated person is its reunion and the opportunity for a child to learn firsthand from their parent why they don't want to go there.
And so in a real sense, I think you mentioned, excuse me, earlier that money had already been provided for, I guess, children of incarcerated individuals who faced a death or a life imprisonment. but that money perhaps was not being effectively used or effectively spent now. Would that be?
Certainly, I don't want to express any disrespect for the people who are serving the needs of the children of the incarcerated, but I think that the efforts are inadequate, and I think that our understanding, the really, one of the best things that I learned studying the death penalty for all this year is that the effects of trauma can be successfully treated. Domestic violence, school violence, violence within the prison, so much of this has to do with our understanding of post-traumatic stress. And one of the leading, her name is Dr. Lee Norton, has identified to me that treatments are successful. They don't look like psychotherapy. They are different. And because so many of us are suffering from post-traumatic stress sorts of symptoms, I think that's the key. I think that's where we should lead. Following 9/11, another one of my children skipped school for the first time.
All right.
And because she is not a seasoned criminal, she of course confessed to her crime right off that she did in fact leave the campus. And when asked why, she said incredulously, "Don't you people read the news?" She was terrified to be in she was not a criminal, but she didn't want to be in a public place and a public target 4 days after 9/11. And I do think we have a generation of children that would benefit greatly if we were to revise the whole system of clemency and the justice system in general with the principles of restorative justice.
Okay. Now, would that mean we would be more concerned about rehabilitation, perhaps, than punishment? Speak to that.
I think
you find that that's a major problem.
It's a major problem, and I do think it addresses the issue that we've got to teach our children to accept responsibility. When the consequences of accepting responsibility are too harsh, we've got to take responsibility for that system. And I think that if we were to allow people to take responsibility with and accept the consequences, I do think that's a very important part of it. Accept the consequences of what they've done. And obviously, if you're dealing with a murder, you can never bring back a life. But if you have murdered an income earner, you certainly can supplement that family's income if you can work in a normal setting.
And so that would be a method of perhaps taking responsibility for having removed that income earner from that particular family, and you would, therefore, you would be willing to compensate in a real sense for the loss of that
I think
life.
compensation is an appropriate manner. I think you have to repair any damage possible, whatever your crime. And the last thing you have to do is, I mean, I think that the most important way to honor a victim is to assist young people in not following your path.
Well, now that's something that we've got about a minute and a half, and let's have you to speak to young people in terms of their responsibility and for education and to stay out of violence and etc. Speak to that.
Keep in mind that I stated that according to social bonding theory, it's not fear of consequences that deters criminal behavior. Instead, it is having a stake in conformity. So, although it may seem in some ways to be rewarding wrong behavior, in fact, if we provide the social supports, and don't brand our children at such an early age. I mean, the fact that single mothers are losing their jobs because we made a mistake and released juvenile records, you know, we've got to repair that damage. We have to be, I think, the justice system has to be the leader in terms of showing young people how to accept responsibility for mistakes and how to correct them.
Very good. And of course, let me, over the last half minute that we have here, Dr. Charvat, thank you for bringing that information and, in a real sense, exploring with us some of the problems that individuals who have been incarcerated and perhaps might face the death penalty, some of the problems that they and their families face, as well as those individuals who might not be, might not face the death penalty but have been incarcerated for the rest of their lives, and some of the problems that this has created for society as well.
It's the latter group for which I have the most concern.
And of course, we can appreciate that, and I'm sure that the information that you've given us is something that can open discussion in reference to such a topic. And of course, let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.